Hello and welcome to Growing You, Growing Your Business with me, Tony Walker. Today I just really want to share or start the show with a little bit of an insight, I guess. And one of the things that I've learnt over the 20 odd years I've been coaching is that behaviour, particularly I've noticed in these COVID times, is really impacted by what is going on below the surface of individuals. So what do I mean by that? Well, I just want to think of the analogy of an iceberg. So what you can see above the waterline is basically the behaviour, but it's what's happening below the waterline is what is really supporting that behaviour. So I just want to go down very briefly just to give you an insight as to perhaps what is below the waterline and how it does impact upon your behaviour and how you can perhaps do something about it. So first thing below the waterline that impacts on your behaviour is your skills, your skill set. So obviously if you're not very skilled at doing something, then you're not going to be as confident in doing that particular task. But obviously as the skills build up, then you get more confident. Great. So next one is your values. Your values are basically those that have been imposed upon you, shared or otherwise by your family and your background and your upbringing, and you then consider those to be your values, whether they're good, bad or indifference, but they will impact upon your behaviour. And the third one is your beliefs. Really, as to whether you feel that you can or can't do something is entirely up to you, but that will impact on your confidence and how you see yourself and your behaviour ultimately. But this all really distills down to your identity. Really how you see yourself, because ultimately if you see yourself as, as a failure, then your behavior will reflect that. But of course if you see yourself, your identity of one that is somebody that has learnt and has learned by failing forward, then your behavior will represent that very learning. So on that basis, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a good buddy of mine, Ben Graham from Mortgage Shore, and certainly I've been working a few years now with Ben, and I've certainly seen Ben's behaviour and identity change, and it's been an absolute pleasure to see what it is that you've achieved in that time, Ben. So welcome.
Thank you, Tony. Great to be here.
Great. Okay, so Ben, just tell the audience, tell us a little bit about yourself. What makes you tick?
Sure. Where do I start? Crikey. So look, a little bit of background, I guess, for starters, Tony. I'm a Wellington boy, born and bred. Grew up there, spent the first 20 years of my life there. Met my lovely now wife, Ruth, in Palmerston North, and we moved up here in late 2013. We'd both been studying in Palmy. At Massey, here as a teacher. I was what you'd probably call a professional student, and that I enjoyed university for the lifestyle, but not so much the study. So when Ruth graduated university, we moved up here to Hawke's Bay, and I'd been working in menswear, so selling suits, making suits, all that goes with that, which I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the wardrobe allowance and the cheap clothes.
Nice.
Yes, of course. But didn't see a lot of career progression there without moving to Auckland, which is not something we were looking to do at the time. So in terms of where I've got to now, some years ago now, we're looking at buying our first house. Our timing was good and that the market was good, but not as crazy as it is now. And we were able to get into our first home. And we'd been to the bank and didn't think it was going to be possible. But we, through a friend of a friend, learnt about this concept of a mortgage broker, a mortgage advisor, and we didn't really know what this was, but went along and saw a gentleman by the name of Mark Davenport who helped us arrange the finance for our first house.
Right.
So we were able to buy our first home, which is very, very exciting. And then we were sitting down with him about a year later to review that, and he said, "How's things going? Are you looking for a change?" And I was, but I didn't really realise it at the time. And he said, "Would you like to come on and learn this industry?" So I said, "Okay." Thought about it. Big risk, big change, going from being employed to being self-employed.
All right.
But took the jump, and here we are almost 5 years later.
Good man.
So there's a bit of background.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's funny because I remember you in that suit shop as well.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And so therefore to see that transition for you in going from, as you say, employee to self-employed. So I've definitely seen the growth in you. And so, obviously thinking about the mortgage industry, the way that the housing market's gone. I mean, everybody knows it's gone crazy. But in the 5 years that you've been doing mortgage broking, what have you learnt about the housing industry? And well, yeah, there's a few additions to this question. But I guess what have you learnt in the industry, and from that learnings, how do you then find yourself advising your clients?
Okay, yeah, good question. I think the biggest takeaway is that property has historically and probably always will be one of the safest and best investments you can make.
Yeah.
There's a lot changing at the moment, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But in terms of what I learned, the industry was a very steep learning curve, as I'm not a banker. The majority of mortgage advisors or brokers, depending on what you want to call them, are ex-bankers.
Yeah.
So they've got the experience in the industry. So for myself coming in, it was a very steep learning curve. So just the industry as a whole is probably the key thing that I've learnt. But I think particularly starting out, I was a recent first home buyer and quite young in terms of the average age of the industry, which meant I had that empathy and the ability to work with first home buyers and understand their plight and their predicament and work alongside them from step A to eventually getting the keys to the home and then being their go-to going forward as well. So that's what I find very rewarding, and that's where I sort of found my niche, because as I was learning, I was able to help those people, because it's not something you learn at school. They don't teach you how to buy a house.
Yeah, and that is a very, very valid point, because and that's been the pleasure, I guess, in watching you grow, because, well, so much so that I even trust my
indeed,
dare I say, but I do,
you're going to be my neighbour soon, and it'll be great.
Absolutely. So so we're going to be very close neighbours, and and I trust you totally with that side of finance. And so great, we're getting our mortgage through you, and you've made it so straightforward. Seriously good. And this is what I guess is often what goes amiss is sometimes, because I'm an ex-banker, what I always tend to do is just focus on the deal and let's get that deal done and move on to the next one. But I found that you don't do that. You're a little bit more, well, you're a lot more subtle than that, and you're geared more towards that relationship, I guess, that you can create with your client. Has that strategy... Well, how has that strategy worked for you, should I say?
I think it is not necessarily a point of difference, but a strength of the way that I operate is that it is relationship based.
Yeah.
And like anything, and again, going back to not having experience in the industry, if you have the type of personality where you can build rapport and get on with most people, that's the most important thing. Everything else can be learnt. One of the things I did learn in the industry, well, in any industry really, is that challenges and things crop up that you need to overcome. But if you expect that, it's a lot easier to deal with. So it's smoothing that process for the client. That in the background you might be under a bit of pressure.
Yeah.
The client doesn't necessarily need to know that, because they're coming to you to make the process as stress free as possible.
Yeah.
It's the analogy you talk about with the duck.
Yes.
Smooth sailing on the top, but underwater the legs are going like crazy. So, yeah.
Absolutely, and certainly I've known some of the deals that you've been working through, and your learning curve has been steep, but you've continued. You've just keep moving forward. So that's why I admire you.
Thank you.
So what then would you advise anybody that is looking at getting a mortgage and I'll just go to the bank? What do I want to use a broker for? Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that the industry is, broadly speaking, quite young still. It's sort of 30 years old, which in terms of a lot of industries is quite young. But the broker industry in New Zealand accounts for close to 50% of the mortgages that the banks do these days. If you go to your own bank, they've got a set of policy and rules, and you've got to fit into that box, and if you don't, they're not necessarily going to be able to help you. Whereas if you were to come to an advisor, be that me or another one, we have access to most or all of the banks in New Zealand, as well as what's called non-bank lenders or other finance companies. So we don't have to try and squeeze you into one box. We can find the box that's going to fit your circumstances and your needs. So it's our job to do that, to not only get you the best deal in terms of interest rates and things like that, but understand your goals and ambitions, not just in the short term, but also going forward.
Yeah. No, that's...
So that would be why.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, because, obviously the banking industry is pretty well established. So I mean, do they like working with you, or do they, would they rather, that people come to them?
It's really interesting, because there wouldn't be many industries where the person who pays you, who's your meal ticket, are also your competitor. So it's quite interesting in that sense. But I think, given the market share now the brokers have, that's 50% of their industry. They don't have to employ their own bankers to pay a salary to.
Good point.
So I think in that sense, yes, it doesn't cost the client anything to use our service. So the bank gets the business that they want, and they pay a commission to the advisor. But what that's worth to the bank compared to what they'd pay in salary or wages, I would say would be well down.
Yeah, and certainly, as you were saying, whilst it's not discrediting the banks, of course.
No.
They will do their best to create that relationship with all the customers that they come across their tables. But what I have found is, again, being an ex-banker myself, we just tended to focus on the deal and doing it as best as we can with regards to customer service. But from my perspective, I think that yes, your customer service is just that step, a little bit above more than what is expected. So that, I guess, is certainly from talking to people who use your services, that's one of the key things that keeps them coming back to see you, is just the way that you make the difficult relatively easy. It's not easy, but it's relatively easy.
Easier. Yeah. I think you have to. I think it's a non-negotiable, that customer service piece. There's all the banks, and then there's close to 40 advisors in Hawke's Bay alone now. Right. So if you're not doing a good job, there's a lot of choice out there. Yeah.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, getting an approval is really, really important, but so is getting on with that person.
Perfect. Okay. So then, we mentioned about, the housing crisis, call it what you like, is going where it's going. And I sort of mentioned it earlier in a question, but I guess just want to drill down a little bit more. But obviously, new home buyers they're perhaps, I don't know, running scared or otherwise, because there's this notion, or it's not a notion, it's actually happened, where the interest rates are starting to go up.
Yeah.
And so we've got almost a perfect storm, haven't we? Where
we do.
House prices going up, interest rates going up, banks are starting to squeeze down on acceptance levels. So how can you help these people then, if there's all this pressure on?
It's a tough time to be a first home buyer at the moment. It really is.
Yeah.
And it's getting tougher, without being too negative. As you mentioned, the interest rates are going up, which for a lot of my generation, all we've known is interest rates going down.
Yeah.
And it's great, because every time you review your home loan, if your fixed rate is coming off, it gets cheaper.
Yeah.
But that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
That coupled with, as you mentioned, the banks changing some of their requirements around who they can and can't lend to, as well as this triple CFA changes, which again are the Reserve Bank imposing more restrictions on the banks, which is making it tougher. So I think there's a lot of people out there who have assumed that they have the right to be lent money, and that has changed. So I think my role, and I'm learning as I go as well, is it's changing more, particularly with the first time buyers, to an education piece. It's not great, yep, off we go, let's get you approved. It's here's some things that you need to do to get to that point.
Yeah.
So it's a longer term sort of game plan for myself and for the client. But if they're willing to, make those sacrifices potentially and do what's required of them, then it's still absolutely possible to get into a home. And I think we're lucky in Hawke's Bay that, yes, the market has, risen rapidly, but compared to the big cities, it's still relatively affordable, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. And of course, there's so much in the way of development that's happening, in and around Hawke's Bay. Central Hawke's Bay is just going crazy, Of course, Tani's doing its thing. So there's some really, really nice areas out there. So never give up. They're still available. They're out there. Go find them.
Yeah. And there's more and more land coming to market to buy. So
Yeah.
It may be that we do a lot more construction lending for those looking to build their first home.
Okay.
Which again has its own set of challenges, as you know.
Yep.
But I think that's probably where we're going to see some growth now.
Right. Right. Okay.
Depending on materials.
Yes, of course, because that's going to be an interesting thing to, I guess, consider is when we're starting to work with a builder. And I don't know whether this is outside of your remit or not, but certainly, with the price of materials going up, the rate in which they are, do builders now still do fixed rate contracts? I mean, or would it be crazy for them to do that? And how does that impact upon any mortgage that you've set up?
That's sort of a developing and an evolving space. So fixed price contracts are what is provided by a building company that the bank likes, because it is by its very nature a fixed price, and that's what you're going to pay. But there's always been a clause in there that says that the builder can make changes to their contract if the cost of materials has gone up. Hasn't been relevant until now, and now we're just starting to see it creeping in. So it may be that we start to see building companies not wanting to do fixed price contracts, which is going to be interesting sort of development, and what the banks do with that will be interesting, because on one hand you got the bank saying we want a fixed price contract, the builder saying we can't provide that. Something's got to give, so it will be interesting.
Okay. All right, so certainly there's been it's been a good time, I guess, to learn to have this learning curve during this housing crisis, or not crisis,
well, it is a crisis, but there's lending has and will always be readily available to the right people, because at the end of the day the banks make money by lending money. So we often go through peaks and troughs where the criteria changes and it gets challenging for a while, and the banks may turn around and go, oh, we're not making any money. So that's when things may be rowed back.
So what about for you then, just in going forward? Now obviously if the interest rates are going up, but your business is growing, and it's growing so well, which is fantastic to see. So what of the future for you? What's the future
for us? It's the I guess not the fear of the unknown, but a little bit of uncertainty, because as you said, the business is going quite quickly in the past sort of 12 months. What that looks like in terms of not only our own business but succession planning within mortgage as a whole. Whether we look to take on more people, whether Ruth, my wife, becomes qualified and starts lending herself, we're not sure. But that's exciting and terrifying all at the same time.
I shouldn't say. Got it? Yes. From a choice perspective, I get that. But having your darling alongside you, of course, is very natural, and it's going to be an enjoyable thing. And it's, in fact, all credit to Ruth. She has really, in the role that she's taken on, I've watched her grow. So as a support person for you, it's really interesting, because the dynamics, bringing in somebody particularly because they're a teacher, so teachers are quite interesting. They're very fixed in the way they think, but Ruth has been brilliant in as much as that. Okay, she has her way of doing things, and then she's open to looking at how to create the systems. And so certainly from my standpoint, I've watched how she has grown, and how she supports, and how she really understands your languaging better in a business environment, so which makes for an overall better product.
There was a period of letting go, and you got control of everything, but her skill set is so different and so much stronger than mine, different areas, and then systems and processes, which aren't my area of expertise. So for her to come in and take over that business management space so I can focus on the clients has been fantastic. In fact, that is something that I'm sure that a lot of the listeners and viewers will understand, those that have got businesses, is really understanding how to recognise a good support system, or develop a support system, and get a support person into your space, because whilst in the early stages all you want to do is control that growth, and everything is just you, and so I've got to make sure that everything's right, and so therefore sometimes just letting go and just letting a little bit of that control go can be quite a challenge. And so again, watching you do that with your lovely darling Ruth, it's fantastic. It's been a gradual process that I've just watched.
and it's been an absolute pleasure just to watch that process. So if you're watching, Ruth, you've done good, girl.
Yeah, how it's when it's your wife and you sleep next to them and you don't have a choice but to listen to them.
Good answer. So fantastic. So let's still look in the future, but just general goals, I guess. So where would you like to be in the next, say, 12 months?
Good question. I've never been a great goal setter, as you know. I've always been content to just let things grow organically, but as we've seen, if you do actually put a little bit of pressure on yourself to grow it, it does happen. So if we can continue to sustain what we've done in light of, a potentially more challenging market, I'll be very, very pleased. And then continue sort of working on a succession plan and a growth strategy in terms of what the business is going to look like in 1, 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
Is what I would like to do.
Brilliant. And as you rightly say, look, just looking at your change of behaviour with regards to goal setting, to have that sort of conversation with Ben in the earlier days, it was not a happening thing, because, as Ben says, he was very much working in the moment, which is great. But the fact that you are now, from a business standpoint, are able to then visualise a little bit more into the future, do you actually find that has helped you in the way that you do business?
It has, yeah, absolutely. I think if we go back to that piece where Ruth coming in is measuring the business in terms of the numbers, that's a great motivator for me. Seeing, cool, this is what you did this month, this is what you've got forecast for next month and the month after. And you go, great, that's looking really, really good. Oh, crikey, you need to sort of pull your finger out and get on with it. It's been good. So what was the question, sorry, Tony?
I can't remember, but I'll move on to the next one. I was just in the moment there. So what I'm thinking now is obviously the brand of Mortgage Sure and Ben Graham. How do people find you?
So majority of our business is still via, referrals from happy clients, which is great, because those are the ones we want, because they come to you primed and ready to go. We have a steady and growing sort of social media presence, and we do some work there, so you'll find us on there. Website we've just redone as well. So across the digital channels, as well as just good old-fashioned referrals, that's how you find us.
So your website address is?
mortgagesure.co.nz.
Fantastic. And you say you have a Facebook page?
Yeah, so Facebook and Instagram is Ben at Mortgage Sure.
Okay.
So there's sort of info, tidbits, what's happening in the industry, photos of my kids, all that sort of stuff. So that's what you find on there.
But it's great. Again, it is about people really getting to know who you are, and I guess for me, in the time that I've known you and Ruth, and of course your growing family, it's been an absolute joy and a pleasure just in working with you and seeing you grow. And so I'm truly excited to see exactly what it is that you managed to attract into your life over the next few months and years, because again, I know quietly, this man just gets on with things, but I know that, as he says, he does the duck or the swan underneath the water. He's thinking all the time. So it's been a pleasure, my friend, and thank you for making the time to come in and have a chat today. It's great just to have a catch up. And so look, if anybody wants to contact you, it's Ben Graham at Mortgage Sure. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks very much, Tony. Appreciate the opportunity.
Welcome.
Cheers.